Okay, it looks like we have one more person coming in here, but I'm going to go ahead and start. My name is Jeff Carroll. I'm the Integrated Pest Management Coordinator at Lehigh County Conservation District. Tonight we're going to talk to you a little bit about mosquitoes, ticks, and spotted lanternfly. So mosquitoes and ticks we're concerned with because they affect public health. Spotted lanternfly is a new invasive. That is an economic pest. It's been causing damage, in our local farms, agriculture, some of the hardwood crops, grapes and hops and things like that. So we definitely want to get rid of that. Pennsylvania is a really big hardwood producer. So, spotted lanternfly is going to be a challenge for us. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So I'm going to start here with our vector-borne disease control portion. And again, that's the insects of public health. So first we'll talk about ticks and tick surveys. The Pennsylvania DEP has added additional funding to vector-borne disease control programs in 2019 for the counties that wish to participate in these tick surveys. Lehigh and Northampton County are participating this year. We also participated last year. I collected ticks from both Lehigh and Northampton County last year, turned those into the DEP. Those ticks are then all tested for tick-borne illnesses. So this year, 2019, the surveys are going to be conducted May through August, and they're going to consist of weekly drags at 2 separate sites within each county. So each county's got 2 sites. We picked a state park and a local county park at each site, and we're dragging those weekly. We will send those ticks away for testing to the DEP lab in Harrisburg, and again, they're testing those for tick-borne diseases. The DEP has been doing tick surveys since 2011. 2019 is the first time that these funds are being available to vector-borne disease control programs so that we can help them with this surveillance. So I'll just leave this up here for a second so you guys can look at this. This is the 2011 to 2018 tick survey data. So as of now, all 67 counties have now been surveyed for adult ticks. This is the Ixodes scapularis. These are the ticks we look for mainly for transmission of Lyme disease. So if you can see this, the total ticks collected were 11,431 from 2011 to 2018. If you look down the Borrelia burgdorferi, does anybody know what that is? So that's Lyme disease. Everybody's familiar with Lyme disease. Now if you look at that percentage rate, that's the amount of Lyme disease that is in Pennsylvania. As we take these ticks out and we test them for Lyme, this is what we're finding. 47% of all of the ticks in Pennsylvania are carrying Lyme. So, that's... Is that the small tick, the ear tick, or is absolutely. Yeah, yes. Yeah. So, when we're talking about these ticks in the different stages of their life cycle, you're going to find that tick, Ixodes scapularis, in different sizes. So in the beginning, in the spring, when they're going to hatch out, they're going to be very small nymphs in those first, second, and third instar stages. They're going to be microscopic in size. And then towards the fall, when you start to find adult ticks, that they'll get the size of a blueberry if you find it on the dog or something like that. A lot of times, these are all the same ticks. They're just in different stages of their life cycle. So often people confuse the fact that, a large tick and a small tick. When we talk about tick checks, we say, if you're going to go out into habitat and come back in, do a tick check. We recommend that people look for these really small ones, and that's the message that all gets out. So people think that those are the only ticks that transmit Lyme disease. The truth of the matter is that all ticks have the potential to transmit Lyme disease. We just kind of harp on the smaller ticks because we feel like those are the ones that you're not going to find. You're going to come across a big tick, we can all kind of do that when we're rooting around. But we really want you to be mindful to think about those very small ticks. In the back of your ear, there's a small crease between your head and your skin here, and you can feel back there and say, there's nothing in there. But, you might go in that crease. These ticks are so small, they're going to get into places that you really have to look hard for them. So that's why we want folks to understand that those really small ticks also transmit Lyme. So Babesia and anaplasmosis, those are also co-infections of that are in ticks that are in Pennsylvania. Those are quite low. Back in 2005, 2006, we thought that 3 to 5% were numbers for Lyme. We didn't think that there was 47%, Lyme in the ticks, but as we've done these studies, that's what we've come to find. So now we're going to move on to mosquitoes and West Nile virus and the history. So West Nile encephalitis is an infection of the brain that's caused by a virus. Encephalitis is swelling of the brain. So encephalitis happens from a lot of different diseases, but here in West Nile virus, that's also a symptom, is the swelling of the brain there. West Nile virus is a flavivirus. Flavus in Latin means yellow. So that was named after yellow fever. That's how these flaviviruses came to be. West Nile virus has a lot of the same symptoms as yellow fever, which is why they put it in the flavivirus category. West Nile virus was first identified in Uganda in 1937. That's in Africa, west of the Nile River. West Nile virus was first reported in the United States in September of 1999 in New York City. I don't know if you guys remember that outbreak, but in the fall of '99 in New York City, 69 people went to the hospital with West Nile virus. It was a major outbreak. It wasn't on anybody's radar. 7 of those people died. So that was the initial outbreak in the United States that caused us to create these programs. West Nile virus has now been found in every state except for Alaska. We'll talk about that in a minute, but there it is. West Nile virus, every state except for Alaska. So anywhere you go in the United States, except for up towards the Arctic Circle, there's a threat of West Nile virus transmission. So this is the West Nile virus transmission cycle. What I would like you to pay attention to are where you see the 2 arrows up there. That is from the mosquito to the bird, and from the bird back to the mosquito. When you see the horse and the human, those are one-way arrows. A human and a horse are not part of the West Nile virus transmission cycle. And the reason we say that is the human and the horse are too big. We're too large of a mammal to be able to multiply the virus and then return it back to a mosquito. So we're what they call dead-end hosts. The reservoir for West Nile virus is the bird population, and the vector is the mosquito. So every year when we have these fresh batches of mosquitoes hatching off in the spring, they're not carrying West Nile virus. They've got to go and bite infected birds that are roosting in the trees, you know, hanging out around your house and things like that. That is how this West Nile virus transmission cycle reoccurs every year, and that's why it's not going away. We can get rid of all the mosquitoes we want. If we don't get rid of the bird population, West Nile virus will always be here. And we're obviously not going to start a bird control program because we want the birds around. So that's the reason that West Nile virus is here to stay. In 2018, 4,729 mosquito surveys were collected that tested positive for West Nile virus across the state of Pennsylvania. So 2018 was a record-breaking year. That's the most amount of positives that we've collected in one year to this point. 130 human cases of West Nile virus in 2018 in Pennsylvania. That's according to the CDC. 8 of those human cases of West Nile virus resulted in death. 173 of the positive mosquito surveys that were collected came from here, Lehigh County, out of those 4,000 and some. 4 of the human West Nile virus cases also came from Lehigh County. So last year in 2018, we had 4 confirmed West Nile virus cases in Lehigh County. So if we look at the geographic distribution of West Nile virus in Lehigh County, you can see up there, that's all of the municipalities. What I can tell you is that West Nile virus was found in almost every municipality in Lehigh County. If it wasn't found in that municipality, it was not because West Nile virus wasn't there. It was because we didn't have a survey out at the time to collect that sample. It is in every municipality. That's the list of where we collected them in 2018. And you can see that Lower Macungie is up there. Okay, so the Lehigh County Vector-Borne Disease Control Program. What does the Vector-Borne Disease Control Program do to help and prevent the spread of vector-borne diseases to county residents? So we do education. That's events like this. You can see the bus tails up there with the little fight the bite, sign on there. So those bus tails just ride around Lehigh County, and as folks are going about their day, if they're behind there at a red light or they're going to get on the bus, that's a good way to spread information. If you see the door hanger there on the door, we will go into known West Nile virus hotspots, places where there are breeding and harborage areas. We will put educational door hangers out so we can let folks know that there's a West Nile virus threat there and some mitigation techniques that they can do to control that. Newspaper and news outlets, we will contact the media if we feel like we need to get the word out a little more. And basically any education opportunity we can find, we'll get out there and spread the word. So this is larval sampling of West Nile virus. That's a water survey, and what we're looking for there are immature mosquitoes that are in the water. Once we get a water sample and we identify those mosquitoes, we can then take control actions or control measures there. And what that does is it stops those mosquitoes from coming off as adults. And then would have to control them then at that point. And adult control has to do with sprays and things like that. The most susceptible part of the life cycle for these mosquitoes is when they are immature larvae in the water. That's where we really mount our attack and try to keep the numbers down. The second thing you'll see there is called a gravid survey. And what that's doing is collecting adult mosquitoes. We'll put that out in the afternoon, let it run overnight, and pick it back up in the morning. That is for a female mosquito that has already taken a blood meal. She's gravid, which means she's looking to lay an egg. And she goes to lay an egg in that pan of water and will get sucked up into the collection chamber, and then we can then send that off to the DEP lab for testing for West Nile virus. It's the blood that is within that mosquito that is going to either test positive or not for West Nile virus. The third one is a BG Sentinel. The BG Sentinel is a host-seeking trap. Now that's not a mosquito who's already taken a blood meal. That is a mosquito that's looking to collect a blood meal. So again, if we put out this BG Sentinel and we find host-seeking mosquitoes that are positive for West Nile virus, that really raises the alarm. Because what we have going on there is earlier in the year, that mosquito has already picked up West Nile virus somewhere. It's looking to feed again, and it has West Nile virus in its system. That's something to worry about, because that's when human transmission starts occurring. So again, as I said before, the samples that are collected out of these adult surveys, we always send those off to the DEP lab for testing. So this is source reduction. Source reduction is another strategy we use to control mosquitoes. That's the elimination of standing water through the removal of artificial containers. So all of the pictures you see up there, those are artificial containers. The tires are artificial containers. The buckets and recycling bins are artificial containers. Even that hot tub is what we consider an artificial container. That's going to hold water. It's going to sit out in the woods, hold water. Mosquitoes are going to come in. And they probably like using hot tubs just as much as we do. So they'll take the advantage of that and breed in there. If you see the mosquito up there, that's a Culex mosquito, and she is laying her egg on the water. What you're seeing there is called an egg raft. That is 300 individual eggs all glued together into an egg raft. So every time a Culex mosquito goes to lay an egg, it lays about 300 eggs. So again, you start having 100 or 1,000 mosquitoes breeding in an area, you times that by 300, the abundance of mosquitoes in the area will really rise quickly. So this is larval control. Again, this is what I was talking about targeting the immature mosquitoes in the water. So we use non-restricted biological controls. These common products are BTI, that's Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis. If you guys are familiar with a show around here in the Lehigh Valley, it's called You Bet Your Garden. There's a guy there who talks about BTI a lot. He's a big proponent of it. He's also an organic gardener who is not into chemicals or anything like that. BTI is a very friendly product. You can use that product on your garden. I mean, you can spray it on your garden and it's still certified organic. So BTI is a very friendly product to use. Another common product we use is methoprene. That's a juvenile growth hormone regulator. We use that in the water as well. There have been studies done on this for 20 or 30 years for methoprene. They've studied non-target effects and things like that. This is also a very friendly product that is only targeting the mosquitoes in the water, and it does a great job at stopping those mosquitoes from becoming adults. Adult control. So this was the spraying that I was talking about that we use to knock down adults. So these are conducted when surveys indicate high adult populations or a West Nile virus threat is present. If you see over there, there's a note. It says a very small but important part of what we do. So we calculate all of the surveys that we do, go into a database, and we start calculating those surveys and the threat of West Nile virus through what we call a vector index. When our vector index hits 300, which to you guys is an arbitrary number, but for us, 300 is the number where when we back calculate data, historically, this is where we see humans starting to become affected with West Nile virus. So 300 is our threshold on our vector index for when we're going to get out there and take action. So again, if we start collecting surveys in an area and the mosquito abundances are incredibly high, but the West Nile virus is not so high in that mosquito population, the vector index is very low. So we don't have a zero tolerance West Nile virus policy. We understand that there can be a certain amount of West Nile virus out, in the environment, and humans are not being affected. So again, there's been extensive studies done on this, and we really try to figure out, what is our threshold to keep the public safe. And if we're out there doing sprays, that's why. That threshold has been met, and it is a threat to public health. We do not get out there before that. So again, if you do hear that there's adult control happening in a certain part of the county, that's the reason why. Mosquito control activities protect public health. This has to do with our bird reporting of dead birds. As I mentioned before, the birds are the reservoir for West Nile virus, and some of them are susceptible, especially our corvids and raptors. So crows and blue jays, hawks, owls, eagles, and falcons. These birds are incredibly susceptible to West Nile virus. They are American birds. They have, West Nile virus is new to them, and they just don't have the immunity that some of these other European birds do. We see starlings and robins and things like that. They're carrying West Nile virus for their whole lives, and they're just asymptomatic. So that's a big part. These guys that you're looking at up here, these aren't so responsible for the spread of West Nile virus. They're actually just, unfortunately, victims. It's those European birds that we have here that are, have no problem carrying West Nile virus. They're the ones that are responsible for the spread. And if you see up there, there's a state West Nile virus site. It's referenced up there. If you do find a dead bird, you can either call us at the office. We'll come out. I can swab it, do a DNA swab on it, and send that off to the DEP. Or you can just contact this website directly. It's up to you how you'd like to take care of that. Humans and horse cases of West Nile virus are reported by veterinarians and physicians. So when we start talking about human West Nile virus, I gave you that number of 8 deaths last year and the 140 some positive, for positive humans. That's all the information we get. After that, we will be notified down to the county level of a positive human, but they don't go any further than that, and that's because of HIPAA laws. Everybody's familiar with the HIPAA laws and things like that. As soon as somebody has some type of health issue, they've got a right to privacy for that health issue. So for that reason, we don't get to know exactly where these people are that become affected. So this is the Pennsylvania code. There is a standing water code in Pennsylvania. This is it. It's been around for a long, long time. I just put this up here because a lot of times people think, well, isn't there something that can be done? My neighbor has a terrible backyard, or there's a person down the street who's doing something wrong. Just do know that Pennsylvania does have a standing water code, and it is very broad. And it says right here at the bottom, it is to be maintained in a manner to prevent the breeding of mosquitoes. So again, if there is mosquito breeding in standing water, it falls under this code right here. So there are teeth to this code, and the issues can be addressed. We're going to talk a little bit about cryptic habitat and harborage areas. This is going to pertain more to kind of your personal homes and where you live and things like that. If you look at this picture here, this was a property I was actually called out to, and somebody had a ton of mosquito breeding going on, and they couldn't figure out where this mosquito breeding was coming from. When I went out and took a look, I looked around the backyard. Some of the grass was growing. It was quite shady. They hadn't cut things back. So when anything is moist and cool and wet and humid, the mosquitoes are going to love that. That's harborage areas. So, you know, this yard was, they did have a really bad mosquito problem. But when we went to look, you know, you can see these 5-gallon buckets here. And those are artificial containers. That's the low-lying fruit. You're like, okay, you've got artificial containers. Where are these mosquitoes? But when we dipped these buckets, there were no mosquito larvae in them. These were spackle buckets and some oil bucket or something like that that still had residual stuff in it. And the mosquitoes had no interest in this at all, but there were a ton of adult mosquitoes around. If you look at this picture, and you can see that the buckets are not the problem here, there is a clue. Can anybody recognize where the mosquito breeding might be taking place? I think yes. If you look at this downspout, you can see water coming out of that. This was 5 or 6 days after the last rain event. There shouldn't be any water coming out of there. So when I went up to look in the gutters, this is what I found. So this is cryptic habitat. These are the places that you need to look. You can have your entire yard clean. You can change your bird bath. When your grandson gets out of the kiddie pool, you can tip it over so it doesn't hold water. You know, you can keep your wheelbarrow behind the shed tipped up so it's not holding water. You can be doing everything right. But if there's just one place that you hadn't looked, those mosquitoes are going to take advantage of that. And what ends up happening with this cryptic habitat is it stays there for a long time. So 2 things are happening here. As the leaves fall in there, you're getting high organic content in the water. That's sending out a signal to that female mosquito that there is plenty of food in there for her babies once she lays them, and that they're going to successfully turn into adults. That's number 1. Number 2 is as this sits up here and these generations of mosquitoes keep breeding and coming off in there, they're putting off a pheromone in that water. And they're telling other mosquitoes this is a perfect place to come breed. So again, you can see those buckets laying around, and you can see there may be a tire in the backyard or something, and it's all clear and clean in fresh water, and you think, where are these? It's because there's a chemical signature coming out of that gutter that's telling all of these mosquitoes this is a prime place to lay your eggs. So cryptic habitat is a very important place to look. So we're going to talk a little bit about the plans for 2019 for our program. What we're doing this year is we're looking to control populations in areas with known historic West Nile virus positives. When we have areas that have a lot of West Nile virus, we usually make those fixed sites within the county. So that means we will do regular surveys at that site just to make sure through the season that the abundances of mosquitoes aren't getting too high and the West Nile virus positives aren't reaching our threshold for our vector index. We would like to increase surveillance into areas of Lehigh County where past historical data is lacking. What that means is not all areas are equal when it comes to the threat of West Nile virus. West Nile virus is bred by Culex mosquitoes. Culex mosquitoes are what we call peridomestic, which means they like to live right next to humans. They tend to live in areas of high population density. So when we're talking about Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton, in these downtown areas, that's where these mosquitoes like to live. And they also like to breed in those areas too. Artificial containers, like we talked about, the buckets, the tires, the things like that are downtown where there are a lot of people, there's a lot of dumping going on. Sometimes there's vacant backyards. We see a multitude of issues that create perfect breeding habitats for these mosquitoes. So the areas that don't have West Nile virus threats so much are the areas that we historically haven't gotten to. Those are going to be the municipalities that are kind of like up along the mountain, kind of closer to Carbon County and places like that, up along Blue Mountain. There are people up there. There are mosquitoes breeding, but a lot of those are woodland mosquitoes. They're what we consider nuisance mosquitoes. Humans are not their number 1 choice for a blood meal. And when we test these mosquitoes, we don't find much West Nile virus in those populations. So again, we do have a goal of still getting up there, getting all of the data, and really we want to quantify exactly, as we did with the ticks, what the threat actually is up there. Another goal of ours is to reduce West Nile virus transmissions from mosquitoes to humans, as well as transmission from West Nile virus from birds to mosquitoes. So again, obviously we don't want anybody getting sick from West Nile virus. That's always a goal of ours. But we also want to reduce that transmission in the birds, because those birds live several years. And once they become infected, they're going to carry that virus for several years. So all of the abundances, if we get a bad year next year and it puts off a high abundance of mosquitoes, if we let the transmission happen into the bird population this year, then it's going to be there and just ready to spread next year. We would also like to continue education and public outreach to increase awareness. We love coming to these events. We love getting the word out. We've been doing it for a long time. The program has been in effect for 19 years now. We've been doing this for a long, long time. And I'm still very surprised when we go to places and they've never heard of the program. On one hand, it's a little disappointing. On the other hand, it's actually very good, because if you haven't heard about us, that means we're doing a pretty good job, and it's not on the top of everybody's radar. So that's a good thing. All right, so thank you for your time. That's all I have for you today with the mosquitoes and the ticks, the vector-borne disease control. Tyler is going to come up next. He's going to talk a little bit about our spotted lanternfly program, and he'll tell you about that. Does anybody have any questions about ticks or mosquitoes before we move on to the lanternfly stuff? Sorry, go ahead. Your hand was up first.
So how do the mosquitoes get back from the birds? I guess I didn't realize the birds were in this cycle here of infection.
That's right. So
birds get infected and they carry them around. And the mosquitoes don't have it. How do the mosquitoes get it back from the birds?
So as we were talking before, when we looked at the transmission cycle of West Nile virus, it's bird to mosquito, and then when it gets into a horse or a human or something like that, it's what we call a dead-end host. So the viremia of that West Nile virus can't amplify enough in a mammal of our size, but when we were talking about a squirrel or a rabbit or a bird or something like that that's much smaller, the viremic load in there gets high enough that when the mosquito puts in the proboscis, there's a two-way, flow going on there. They're putting in an anticoagulant, and then they're pulling out blood. So as they're pulling out that blood, the bird is perfect size for the right viremic load to be, it's what we call a very competent reservoir. So it's very competent in transmitting West Nile virus to the mosquito. Yes?
I live along the little bitty high, just west of Brookside. The water, the last 9 months along there is horrendous.
Yes.
There's puddles everywhere.
Yes.
They dry up to an extent, but there's always water and moisture.
Yes.
What can be done about it?
So he's asking, he says it's for the last 9 months, there's been a lot of rain and a lot of standing water in the fields, in the grass. You're seeing puddles like that. These are these transient puddles. It's intermittent standing water. That's what you're talking about there. So those are a terrible headache because, again, those puddles are transient. So, each time it rains and there's some type of flood event, those sites have to be revisited and retreated each time. We can't go out there and put down a product that will last 30 days or 90 days in the grass there, like a briquette or something like that, because when that water goes away, you don't want the briquettes or the product laying there, you don't want dogs to come along and eat it or something like that, So we do have 30-day products, and we will put them in these known areas, we'll put them down, and we'll get a little bit of residual out of there. But what we normally end up doing is having to go back and retreat those areas with the BTI, which is a single pulse product. That's the way that we address those issues. And if you're a homeowner and you have a property specifically that has those issues, you can buy BTI at Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that. They sell them in different forms. Dunks, mosquito dunks, they're little donuts they look like. And you can drop those in the water. Those work perfectly. They also sell BTI in granular form. that you can sprinkle into those puddles. That is the most basic and effective way that you're going to mitigate mosquitoes out of there. The other way is just through mitigation of the site. So that might be bringing in some clean fill and, you know, those depressions where the water...
Do that during the floodplain.
Well, okay, so there you go, which is why we're continually down there putting these products out. Yeah,
Well, we're talking about a lot of acreage.
yes, yeah, absolutely.
It's not something we can deal with as a homeowner. It's just too much.
Well, right, so again, on your private properties, if you've got a puddle, you know, the size of the table or something, those are the areas that you're gonna be focusing on just for yourself in your own backyard. So typically through our program, we don't visit private properties unless we are called to the private property by the homeowner to do a treatment. And we will gladly do that for you. The service is for everyone in the county. But typically where we are focusing our attention and resources are in areas exactly like you're talking about. You know, like down on Spring Creek Road and in these areas that they do flood. We were down there the last 2 weeks of May here. I treated 5 acres down there myself. And then my technicians have also been down there and treating as well. So that's the way we handle that. It's, we'll get down there with that BTI, it's a single pulse product, and we'll have to get down there for every flood event and treat that water. So, go ahead.
Two questions. One, have we reached the threshold yet in any part of Lehigh County, especially along the country, where the threshold is for the West Nile and normal mosquito population? Have we reached that threshold yet?
So, we have not reached our threshold for adult control, the vector index like you're talking about. No, we are very lucky this year. We have actually had no West Nile virus positives to date. So the vector index is 0 countywide, which is good. I am pleased about that, and I hope it stays that way for as long as possible. We will start collecting positives here soon. They're going to come in. It's inevitable. But at this point, it's pretty good so far.
Second question I have is, this year, unlike many of the other years that we've had this type of situation, the maple trees and other trees have relentlessly given away their seed pods more than usual this year. And they have clogged up gutters throughout the whole area. And I think you may not see the repercussions of what your threshold being met now. But give it late July and August when those people haven't still cleaned out their gutters. And I'm seeing the helicopters from, I call them helicopters from maple trees, that are the largest I've ever seen in my life coming off these trees this year because of the abundance of moisture in the area. So I've seen tons of clogged gutters like that picture you showed. And people just, I think that's where the emphasis needs to be done. Because it's not always here in Northern Country, but you can go in a townhouse complex and we have maple trees in, like you said, that mosquito is going to be in that gutter. That's where the high density population is going to be. Places like Bryansville and Ancient Oaks and Ancient Oaks West, where we have a large older population of trees, you're going to see that come out later on this year, and that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, again, a perfect example, which is why I used that as an example here for cryptic habitat. I am trying to get the word out that gutters do need to be cleaned because they will breed mosquitoes. They'll breed them by the thousands. You know, so yeah, it's a very important message, and we do look to get that out. Yeah. Go ahead.
Would the BTI help the gutter?
Yes. Yes. So you could put BTI in the gutter, you know, and do a treatment up there. The way that I would suggest to do it would be mitigation of the problem. So you know, you'd want to like get your garden hose. They sell the high volume nozzle on it, so you can get a lot of pressure behind it, you know. And you just want to get that inside the gutter there, and you want to blast out the debris that is blocking up that gutter. So the first thing you're going to want to do, you know, you can get up there and you can clean your gutter at first if you'd like, you know, put it in the buckets, come off the ladder, put it somewhere you'd like. But after that, you really want to blast that downspout. You want to just, you'll start blasting water in there, and it'll build up behind whatever blockage is in there. And the weight of the water eventually will push that blockage out. You're going to end up with a big mess in your front yard under your downspout, but you're going to solve that problem. Then you just clean, you just clean up those leaves out of the front yard there, problem solved. So yeah, I'd recommend in that case that you would want to mitigate the standing water rather than just treat it up there the way it stands. And
You also treat the backyard?
yes, so
How do you do it?
so are you looking to treat standing water in your backyard, or are you looking to get?
Plants.
Okay, so that would be to kill adult mosquitoes that are in the harborage area, which are the plants. So if you're looking to get rid of mosquitoes that are hanging out in the harborage area, which are those moist, humid, shady environments that we're talking about, which is a nice planted bed or something like that, again at Home Depot or Lowe's, they're going to sell products that they come in a ready-to-use bottle. You just screw your garden hose onto the back of it, you turn it on, and you just start shooting it onto the vegetation, and the water runs through the bottle of the product, and then we'll put it out on the leaves. A very common product that they're using now is called Cutter. Cutter, C-U-T-T-E-R. Yes. So they will sell that at Lowe's or Home Depot, and if they don't sell that, you can just go in there and say, I'm looking for a mosquito barrier spray product, something like Cutter, and the person who works there will lead you right to those products. And again, very easy to use. You just, screw it on the nozzle of your hose, squirt your plants. You should get 3 weeks to a month residual effect out of there. So any mosquitoes that come into your backyard and they're looking to, mosquitoes are very weak flyers. They want to rest all the time. So they're going to land on this vegetation to rest. And as they land there, they come in contact with these products, and that will lower those numbers as well. Yes?
The babesia isn't very common from what you said.
No, it's not. No, at this point, no.
Isn't it generally fatal?
Yes, not generally fatal as in like more than 50%, most of the time, no, that's not so, but it does have, it does have very serious repercussions, and it can be fatal if it goes untreated, yes.
Where did that originate?
I'm sorry?
Where did that originate?
Oh, that,
Virus you're talking about, what about that?
right, yeah, so that's a good question. I'm not sure where babesia originated from. I don't know that. Yes?
One other thing, because of the major catastrophic hailstorm that we had yesterday here, a lot of the aggregate off the shingles piled up in those gutters, caused damning effects and other things over the next 6 months. Maybe that's something you want to put in your wording as well, that the upper McCounty, lower McCounty, Coopersburg, upper Sockmore, and whatever, got hit with that hailstorm yesterday. There's going to be tons of that aggregate sand in that gutter, which is going to cause things to dam up and produce stagnant water in there.
Yeah, no, it absolutely will, and you're right about that, especially what you were talking about before with the helicopter, the seeds that are being spread and things. I mean, just driving around today doing the work, the roofs of all of the houses, that had trees around them, they're just covered in leaves and branches and debris and things like that.
The hail yesterday was so big, it just
Yeah.
stripped the leaves off on the street.
I didn't get much rain at my place, so I was very surprised to see the damage that was out there, but whatever happened down here, it looks pretty serious, because there's a lot of debris out there right now, yeah. Any more questions? All right, thank you very much. I'm now going to turn it over to my field technician, Tyler, and he is going to talk to you about spotted lanternflies.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Tyler Sachs. I'll be talking to you tonight about the spotted lanternfly issue that we have here in Lehigh County and all of southeastern Pennsylvania. Let's get this loaded up. So I'm assuming that everyone here tonight knows what the spotted lanternfly looks like. Probably has everyone had them on their property at least? Okay. Depending on where I'm at in the county, I get many different responses. Some people don't even know what they look like or even the size of them. And when we get into lower parts of Lehigh, we have people who are losing trees already because of them. All right, so we're with the Lehigh County Conservation District. We've taken on the spotted lanternfly outreach program this year, and we're going around doing the talks, trying to inform everyone of the spotted lanternfly and provide educational material for everyone. Tonight we're going to talk more about the control methods that you can take on your property, and the life cycle, what they look like, what to look for. So a little bit of a background about the spotted lanternfly. Spotted lanternfly is a plant hopper. It is native to China, India, and Vietnam, and it arrived here in Pennsylvania in 2014. Its host plants includes grapes, stone fruits, malus species. The preferred host, of course, is the ailanthus tree or the tree of heaven. That's the big one that everyone hears about. It's an invasive tree that grows along many roadside ditches. You'll see it along many highways here in Pennsylvania, tree edges. And its native habitat, it's kept in check by natural predators or pathogens, many of which we don't have here in Pennsylvania, which is why it's an issue here. There is one generation per year. It starts hatching about now. Right now we're having all sorts of first instars are hatching from their egg masses. Around July, we're going to start to see it change into the fourth instars. That's when they become red. Right now they're just the little tiny ones that they're black with white spots. And by September, we're going to start to see the adults. Those are when everyone really starts to notice them. That's when they have the wings. They're jumping around everywhere. They're everywhere at that point. So, like I said, it goes from an egg to an adult in 1 year. Each female spotted lanternfly can lay up to 3 egg masses. Each egg mass can have about 40 to 60 eggs. They die after the first hard frost, though it seems to be adapting to the cold weather. So here's a little visual for you to see. The egg masses are laid, the first instar hatches, eventually they'll molt out into the second and then the third instar, finally molting out into the fourth instar. That's when you see the red phase, and then finally molting into the adult. The adult mates and then becomes gravid, lays their eggs, and then die. Egg masses. Egg masses are laid on anything and everything stationary. I could sit here and list off every single thing that we found egg masses on, but I'll let your imagination do the work. Here's a few pictures: horse trailers, decks, signage, burn barrels, anything that is stationary and flat for them to lay their egg masses on. If it's not flat, like rough bark trees, they're going to find a spot in that rough bark to lay their egg mass. First instar nymphs. This was taken May 6th of 2019 at the Lehigh County Conservation District office next to Dorney Park in Allentown. This is what they look like when they first hatch. This is actually a few hours after they first hatch. When they first hatch, they actually come out white, and eventually they begin to form and turn black. So the first through the third instars of the spotted lanternfly nymphs, they look pretty much exactly the same, except they progressively get larger after each instar, black with the white spots. The fourth instar, they get the red with the white spots. Fourth instar with adults. Has everyone seen the instars? There you go. You got pictures on the sticky bands. Awesome. Many people don't know what they look like when they first hatch, and they only know what the adults look like. So now is the time to start looking for nymphs if anyone doesn't know what they look like. That's why I put that in there. Agricultural damage, why it's a concern in Pennsylvania. We've got $16.7 billion worth of forest products, 28 million in grapes industry, 87 million in the apple industry, 19 million in the peach industry, 944 million in the nursery and landscaping industry. So there is a big concern economically in Pennsylvania. The spotted lanternfly, they have a proboscis like a mosquito. As the mosquito injects its proboscis into your skin to suck the blood, the spotted lanternfly injects its proboscis into the tree through microscopic holes in the bark, and it drinks the sap of the tree. The spotted lanternfly then excretes what's called the honeydew. The honeydew pretty much falls over any undergrowth underneath that tree, and from it grows the black sooty mold. In the picture, you can see the black sooty mold beginning to form. The black sooty mold can pretty much prevent photosynthesis in those plants by covering the leaves. If you have any trees that are very heavily infested when you walk under these trees as the honeydew is raining down. It really feels like it's raining down. You get covered in it, it feels like you're covered in sugar water because it's so sticky. You can see if you've got a tree above a deck, the deck will get covered, the black sooty mold grows. There's a lot of damage that we can't estimate. Property values, tourism at the PA parks and game lands, PA ecosystems, new business initiatives. A lot's at stake just even because of the quarantine. Everyone coming into Pennsylvania needs to be checking their vehicles. There needs to be permits on every vehicle. We'll get into that later, but there is a lot at stake, and there's a lot that we can't estimate. Research is still being done to see what the economic impact is going to be because of the spotted lanternfly, but there's a ton of research currently being performed. The quarantined counties. Recently, we introduced Dauphin County into the quarantine zone. They are in other states as well. We're hoping to try and stop the spread of west of Pennsylvania. The biggest thing currently is just check your vehicles and stop the spread. If we can kind of keep it contained in the quarantine zone, then maybe we can actually kind of fight from the outside in and prevent the spread, eliminate the spotted lanternfly. That's the hope, at least. So I live within the quarantine zone. What should I do? If you see it, squash it, look before you leave, and do not knowingly move spotted lanternflies. Also remove any egg masses that you see. Once you scrape or kill an egg mass, you remove 40 to 60 lanternflies. So the first thing to really do is become familiar with the preferred host tree, or the tree of heaven. It's an invasive tree. If it grows on your property, it's good to remove it to begin with just because it's invasive. The lanternflies love the ailanthus tree. It's thought that possibly the reason that they go after this ailanthus tree is they use there are thought to be toxins in the sap of the ailanthus tree, and it's thought that possibly when the spotted lanternfly feeds on the ailanthus tree, it uses those toxins in its system as type of a way of fighting back at predators, or a protective feature for itself. So any bird or mammal that comes to try and eat it gets sick, but that's, again, being researched still. There's not much known here in Pennsylvania or in general of the spotted lanternfly, just because it's new to us. It was an invasive pest in South Korea and was able to wipe out the peach industry in, I believe, 2 years. That was because no one really knew how to control it. In its native states, there are many natural predators and pathogens that are able to control it, so it's never really been a problem anywhere else. Become familiar with the lookalikes of ailanthus tree. Just because you have a tree that has those compound leaves like here in the ailanthus tree doesn't mean that you have an ailanthus tree. Black walnut or staghorn sumac have compound leaves that look identical to it, so it can be tricky for some people who aren't familiar with trees. Now this, all right, it looks good for you guys. We have handouts up here, and they are pretty much spotted lanternfly management calendars. So these give you a good idea of what month to start looking for the different stages of the lanternfly and when to take action. So spotted lanternfly control, you're going to find egg masses on anything. Has anyone had spotted lanternflies at their property this bad? Yes, okay. All right, so I asked this question, well, we had the talk this year, so before we haven't had too much down here. Lower Milford Township, they've had it. People have lost trees already because of it. South Whitehall Township, once we start getting north, people haven't really seen them this bad yet. I say yet because it will be coming. So the first real step to stopping the spotted lanternfly is just scraping the eggs. Once you scrape the eggs, you remove 40 to 60 lanternflies from the population. That's a great first step to take. The next step in mechanical control is the sticky bands. When you drove in today, you probably saw the yellow sticky tape around all of the trees here at the township building and the rest of the property. That's sticky bands that are being used to try and catch any of the first instar nymphs that are hatching from the trees. And those are going to be monitored pretty much throughout the summer to control the spotted lanternfly. Sticky bands, they should be used on pretty much trees that are infected heavily on your property. You shouldn't necessarily ban every single tree that you have on your property unless it's heavily infested or it's a known area from last year.
I have several different types of trees. The only
Yeah.
ones I found were the maple trees.
Yes,
And I mean, they were just covered with them at the end of
Yes.
last year. I scraped them all off and
yeah.
as best I could, but
So,
But they don't go after all the maples, only certain maples.
yes, yeah,
Some
well,
that there are none
so
of.
there's about 70 plus different trees that they feed on. At our office in Allentown, we have the 78 on-ramp right behind our office. There's a lot of ailanthus trees. That's last summer, that's pretty much where they went through all of the phases of their life cycle before they became adults, and they all migrated down to the red maples in our driveway. Now we have red maples that are completely coated from top to bottom in egg masses and now the first instars. The red maples in our property, however, are currently they're being used in a study by the Penn State Extension Office, so we can't do any actual control methods of our own from the Conservation District, but the red maples are being affected heavily.
did you get those sticky bands at Home Depot?
Yes, yep. So the sticky bands, it's great time to start is now. They're hatching, this is the best time to use it. Should be used on it can be used on any tree that has spotted lanternfly. So the red maple is a great tree to use it on.
Put them at the top, the bottom?
4 feet off the ground or about chest height's the best place to use it. You want to attach it pretty firmly around the tree, make it sure it's secure. There have been instances, especially with the sticky bends that we're using, is that if it's a rough bark tree, they crawl behind it. Then you're not catching anything. You have to kind of be mindful of what you're doing and how it's going to work with any real trapping. Another issue that we run into is there's different types of sticky bands. Many different manufacturers make different types of sticky bands that work differently. Some are stickier than others. There's a bunch of different project or research projects going on to see which ones work best. Some of the best sticky bands out there currently, the supply is higher than, or the demand is higher than the supply. They can't make them quick enough, and so we're stuck with kind of what we have, and we have to work with what we have. You have a question?
Well, like squirrels or anything?
So, yep, I'm getting to that. Yep, that's a great point. So we just cover the basics of this real quick. So the sticky bands, starting now, they should be changed out about every 2 weeks. Record your data. If you have sticky bands on your property, a good thing to do, like even with trapping mosquitoes, is to record your data. Each tree that you do, you should kind of keep a track of how many trees are on your property, give each one a number, keep some sort of record to see, is your population increasing when you're trapping these things? Count how many are on your sticky band. Is the population increasing? Is it decreasing? See how your control is actually going. Right now, there is an app in development, possibly by the Department of Agriculture. I'm not sure if it's the United States or just Pennsylvania, but there is an app in development to record all of your data. And that'll be used by the scientists and the researchers eventually to actually control or see throughout Pennsylvania how the population is fluctuating. So, sticky bands, they are effective when used correctly. Whew. I just got a message, battery's running low. So the bands, especially with ours, are about 8 inches in diameter, in length, or width. So we recommend, and the Department of Agriculture recommends, that they be cut in half or in thirds. It reduces the surface area and it reduces any non-target species from being attached, i.e. birds, small mammals, bats. We've had a lot of pictures of non-target species being caught, whether it's the woodpeckers. There's been a lot of pictures surfacing around. The best thing to kind of prevent this is either cutting the bands in half, reducing surface area, as well as building a cage. There's a lot of videos by the Penn State Extension offices on how to build these cages out of just easy products that you might have sitting around the house.
If I give you my email, will you email this to me?
Sure, definitely. Chicken wire, little box wire, anything, you can kind of just build these cages to try and prevent any non-target species from being collected. Another option, which is outlined in, we have a nice handout here for sticky band management, is using 3 to 5 inch wide plastic or water resistant paper wrapped around the tree and then applying petroleum jelly to that paper. The petroleum jelly actually collects these first instars. You're going to have to kind of monitor it a lot more heavily just because it's not going to be as sticky, but it's and it will discolor bark if you get it on the bark, so you want to keep it on that that paper. But it reduces the amount of any non-target species from being collected. So if a bird gets caught in that petroleum jelly, the bird can at least get out, fly away. It's not going to be stuck as much as it would be to the sticky tape. So there are options. When using sticky bands, you should be responsible with it, as bad as it sounds, but it is technically a type of pesticide. It's a mechanical control, so with any pesticide, really, it should be used responsibly. Chemical control. So once we get past these mechanical control uses, we get into the chemical control. That's the next kind of step in our IPM toolbox, integrated pest management. The Pennsylvania law requires that pesticide labels list the site where a pesticide, such as an insecticide, may be used in Pennsylvania. Insecticide labels do not have to specifically list the targeted insect. There are insecticides labeled for use on ornamental trees and around buildings. These products are legal to use on the sites listed in order to control spotted lanternflies in Pennsylvania. What that means is that pesticide laws are very tricky. In the United States, many states go by the insect that you are trying to attack. In Pennsylvania, it's a little bit different. It goes by the site that you are using the pesticide. So many products are listed for whether it's ornamental trees or garden or fruit trees or anything like that. There are products out there listed for ornamental use, which would be your yard, any trees that you have growing in the side yard, anything really on your property that you deem ornamental. That being said, some insecticides available at your local garden or hardware store can be used as soil drenches, bark sprays, or direct sprays. We have contact and systemic pesticides. The contact pesticides do exactly what it sounds like. It kills the insect upon contact. It has no real residual effect. It kills it when you see it. The systemic treatments, however, will have a very long residual effect, some being as short as maybe a week or up to a few months, possibly a few years. The systemic treatments are, eventually they're absorbed by the tree. Anything that feeds on that tree is then killed. That's kind of the basics of how a systemic works. So direct sprays of contact insecticides are applied to surfaces where the spotted lanternfly feeds and walks, which can include the base of the tree, such as the tree of heaven, where spotted lanternflies are abundant, and they can also be applied directly to spotted lanternfly nymphs and adults. So that being said, there are contacts that can be sprayed to the bark of the tree. They have a little bit of a residual. When they walk on it, it will kill them. Some can be applied directly to the spotted lanternfly. It kills it when you see it. These, however, don't have a very long residual effect. And any weather conditions, like we have tonight and all year long, when it rains heavily, anything that's really on the outside that you're spraying down, it's going to wash away. The efficacy is going to be lowered. The residual is going to be lowered. So systemic treatments, you may also apply systemic insecticides using a soil drench around the base of the tree, as a bark spray on the trunk of the tree, or as a direct spray on the leaves of the tree. Systemic insecticides can be applied using any of the methods above, but keep in mind that systemics take time to move into the tree. Like I said, systemics are absorbed by the tree. Some of these systemic treatments will take time to be absorbed, so now is really the best time, or even early summer, because it's going to take time for that tree to absorb, especially depending upon the size of that tree. They should be applied to trees actively growing so that they should not be applied in the late fall or winter, although some of the injections we'll get to, they have been found to be working even later in the year. Systemic insecticides can be injected into a tree. This requires special equipment by a tree care professional. This is one of the best methods currently being used. It's literally like it sounds. As you can see from the picture, it's a hypodermic needle. They drill a hole into the tree and they inject the systemic into that tree. It goes directly into the root system or the tree, and then it absorbs and spreads throughout the tree. Anything that feeds on that tree then later will die. There's about a 2-year residual on that tree then to be treated. They're a little bit costly at first, but when you divide it by the amount of years that tree is then treated for, it tends to work out. Bark sprays. They are shown to work well for spotted lanternfly control, but some of these products also require being mixed with a penetrant, which allows the insecticide to penetrate the bark and move into that tree. There are penetrants available to homeowners, including Pentrabark. Those can be available at Home Depot or Lowe's, but you must read the label of the insecticide while you purchase to determine whether it should be used as a soil drench, bark spray, or direct spray. So what this means is that there are pesticides that you can mix with this, the bark penetrant. So some things, they don't work well on their own. They need that penetrant kind of to help it be absorbed into the tree. This is all going to be on the label. As you can see, I put this little read the label sticker on every single page. That's something we can't emphasize enough, is read the label, make sure you know what you're doing. Don't be doing stuff on your own. The label, they know what they're doing. They put it on there for a reason. Soil drenches. Systemic insecticides applied in the soil around the trunk of the tree. My bad. This, again, go by the label. It is literally, you pour the insecticide around the base of the tree and it absorbs it through the roots. This does take a lot longer because it has to kind of work through the soil and be absorbed by the roots and work its way up the tree. Ideally, the soil drenches work best when applied in the early summer to the trees that have had high spotted lanternfly populations in the past and are likely to have them again. This is a cheaper method. It has a shorter residual. Now, again, would be the best time to do it, and the best trees to do it would be the ones that you have known have had spotted lanternflies in the past, as well as trees that have high numbers of egg masses on them. To protect the pollinators, soil drenches of systemic insecticides should be applied after a tree's flowers have faded. Ongoing research. Please note that most currently available products are not registered for use on spotted lanternflies. It is legal to use them as long as you follow the label instructions, but these products and/or their manufacturers are not liable for results when used against spotted lanternfly. Research is ongoing to identify the insecticides that are most effective on spotted lanternflies while posing the least risk to humans, pets, beneficial insects, and the environment. Additional field trials are being conducted to test the efficacy and residual activity of a wider range of the insecticides that are available to homeowners. We have not yet evaluated the non-target effects of listed insecticides on beneficial insects, including the pollinators. We do not recommend treating your entire property, since these insecticides are not specific to spotted lanternfly and beneficial insects may be affected as well. Only treat the areas of your property that have high densities of spotted lanternfly. Do not treat every tree on your property. That is not a good idea. The goal is to really just suppress the numbers on your property. You may not be able to eliminate everything, especially if you have neighboring properties that don't control populations, so it will be coming in on your property. The goal is to really protect your trees, as well as reduce the spotted lanternfly population. But another thing to make note of is to not do any treatments off of your property. It's illegal to do pesticide treatments on any other property but your own, so keep that in mind. Listed here, as well as in the packets provided, you guys can come up at the end to get one. These are the, Penn State put out a giant list of pesticides, active ingredients, the mode of exposure, which is either a contact or a systemic, the available products to you as homeowners, the legal use, the activity against the spotted lanternfly, and the residual effect, whether it's good, excellent, poor. Right now, the best active ingredient is the dinotetrafuran, listed here as the third one, or the bifenthrin. Dinotetrafuran, though, that's the one that is being used primarily for tree injections and everything else.
I've done my own studies.
Okay.
Something like this on my own trees. And just want to let you know the first one up there is the best one.
Yeah?
And the reason why I consider that is the bifenthrin. If I say it wrong, please correct me.
Yeah. Bifenthrin? Bifenthrin.
Okay, bifenthrin. It's a pyrethrin-based type of insecticide which will break down easily. But one of the things I've learned with the lantern bug is a leaf hopper. It's a plant hopper, you call it. I call it a leaf hopper, but it pops. It jumps. You know, you hit it, it jumps under the grass. It does this, it jumps that. It doesn't really fly, it hops. The moment that product hits its legs, it's almost, it's knocked down. He ain't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And if you spray the bark and the outside of it, and you have to use an oil-based product of that pesticide. And what it does is it lays on the bark, and lays on the tree, and lays on the grass. It won't kill it.
So,
the legs will touch it, the wings will touch it, and it's dead.
and this is a contact
Yeah,
pesticide.
It's basically
So-
a contact pesticide, and the nice thing about it, I put it in my sprayer, and I come down, and I'm not kidding you, I've had a pile that deep of blood.
Yeah,
at the bottom of my
I've
tree.
definitely seen it.
But like you said, you can't spray it, you gotta spray it when they're active, you can't spray it when they're pollinators on there. But the most thing that I thought was real critical is, because I've seen them on the red maples, that's
Yeah.
where I've had the problem, is the ladybugs are also on there. And using the sticky tape will kill the ladybugs. And you gotta wait till the ladybugs are off the tree and then hit it.
Yeah. So again, it's there's many different products, and even just if you're heavily infested with the spotted lanternfly, the contacts are definitely a great way to kind of just eliminate what you see.
And the nice thing is you gotta spray it up in the tree. A lot of people think that egg masses are within reach.
Well,
They're
that's-
up there.
that's
You
a
need
great point.
sprayer to get 'em
That's a
back.
great point. Is you can scrape all of the egg masses that you want that you can reach, but the majority of the egg masses are out of reach. It's a problem. Egg masses, though, scraping egg masses is a great method to use, especially on products that are mobile. The trees, however, that's where we get into these pesticide use and the sticky bands. But the pesticides, that's at your discretion. We're going to provide you with the information. You can use that however you wish. So I'm in the quarantine zone. What should I do with my yard waste? Avoid moving any plant debris, fallen trees, branches, or trimmings outside of the quarantine zone. Inspect yard waste and destroy egg masses if possible. The Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture recommends that you chip all woody debris on site to 1-inch pieces and leave on site. Compost to specifications, or take chips to an organic recycler. Now, the big thing, the regulation. You're inside the quarantine zone. That's next, actually. Inspect all of your vehicles. Don't go outside of the quarantine zone, especially if you're going on a long road trip. Check your cars for spotted lanternflies. Make sure you're not actually spreading the spotted lanternfly. The quarantine, though. For businesses, agencies, and organizations, a spotted lanternfly permit is required for those located or working within the quarantines who move vehicles, products, or other conveyances within or out of the quarantine. Available at extension.psu.edu. These permits are free. They are required for all businesses, agencies, and organizations. Regulation has begun by the Department of Agriculture, and they have already started with traffic stops. Initially, they will be providing warnings to anyone who does not have a permit. There will be fines from anywhere between $50,000 to $20,000. The way that these permits go, is that the businesses have to go online, take a small quiz to show that, or to learn about the spotted lanternfly, show that you know your information about the spotted lanternfly from a short quiz, sign up for the amount of vehicles you have, sign up your business, you get sent these permits. Each vehicle has to have a permit. One person has to take this quiz, and then they are required to educate the rest of their staff on the spotted lanternfly. One of the big things from these traffic stops already that they're finding is that these trucks, they have them, they have the permits, but the driver does not know what that permit is even for or what the spotted lanternfly is. So the businesses that are being found to have drivers who don't know what the spotted lanternfly is are being then contacted and monitored then for the rest of the season to make sure that they are educating the rest of their staff. So outlook and measures being taken. USDA is treating on the outer edge where the populations are small and will begin to move inward towards the center of the quarantine zone. So they are pretty much, what they've been doing is they are donating the area. They're working on the outside, preventing the spread any further and working in. Penn State University is leading the research efforts currently underway to answer the many questions we have about the insect's biology, pesticide studies, and the ability of the insect to adapt to the environment in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture is treating areas where the population numbers are high and is targeting high-risk pathways which may contribute to moving the insect to other locations. As funding is available, both USDA and PDA will work on properties for treatment, private properties anywhere, and if you have property with high populations, especially farms or local businesses, you can contact the Department of Agriculture and they may come out and do treatments on your property. PDA is also surveying all counties in the state outside the quarantine zone looking for spotted lanternflies. There's a call center that you can report spotted lanternflies outside the quarantine zone. If you see anything or if anyone sees anything and reports it, PDA will send a task force out to actually monitor the area and identify whether or not that was a hitchhiker or there's an established population outside the quarantine zone. If they do find that there's an established population, they will expand the quarantine zone and prevent that spread any further. A list of research projects going on. I won't get into this, but there are, on PDA's website, you can go and look at all of the different research projects going on, the project status, the lead researchers, and the research affiliation. Recently, there's been a study that was released of the two local pathogens, the native pathogens that have been killing the spotted lanternfly. Our own environment is fighting back against the spotted lanternfly. That's something to be pretty proud of. Some of you may have already seen this and just haven't known about it. If you found spotted lanternflies that were pretty much dead on your tree and they had what looks like just some sort of mold that was connecting them to the tree, I've seen it. Didn't know what it was at the time, of course, but it's kind of like you tend to find them in the higher density areas, and it spreads easily, I guess. I guess that's cut off at the bottom. Sadly, it's not really something to really sit on. It's not going to spread like a wildfire. It's not like a virus among the population. It's naturally occurring in arthropods, so it'll kill other arthropods, especially beneficial ones as well. But it is promising. And if we can't keep it contained to the quarantine zone, then the use of it as maybe even a control method down the road is just out the door. So keeping it contained is the #1 goal for us as residents. So what can be done? Kill the eggs October through May by scraping them off of surfaces, double bag them and throw them in the garbage, scrape them into a Ziploc bag of alcohol or hand sanitizer to kill them. Removing spotted lanternfly hosts, as in the Atlantis, saving only the males, using as trap trees. This has been a method used by PDA for large density areas. They treat the male tree, the spotted lanternfly, they cut down all of the Atlantis trees, they all go to one tree that's treated. That kills the majority of them. Trees can be treated with systemic pesticides. June through August, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture recommends tree injections and bark sprays applied by professional applicators and soil drenches or foliar sprays that can be applied by homeowners. It recommends 7 different pesticides as of June 2018. These can be found online on their website. It's just a very broad list of what can be done. Frequently asked questions. Spotted lanternflies are harmless to humans, except economically. They do not overwinter in the homes. That was a big concern this past Christmas season with the Christmas trees. They do threaten $18 billion in agriculture of 2018 and now 19. The black sooty mold, a byproduct of its presence, threatens tourism and outdoor recreation in the industries of Pennsylvania. Up-to-date information can be found at PDA's website as well as the Extension website. Reporting, if you do feel like you have a high priority hotspot for spotted lanternfly, please contact the officials. There is a spotted lanternfly hotline, 1-888-4-BAD-FLY. There's someone on the other end of the line, a live person ready to take your call Monday through Friday from 8 to 5 p.m. They will add you to a mailing list. You can get the most up-to-date information on the spotted lanternfly. If you are outside the quarantine zone, however, please do us a favor and report it. If you have any questions, the PDA is always available, the local extension office is always available, us at the Lehigh County Conservation District are always available. We do have sticky bands that we are providing to all of the municipalities. The municipalities then will be able to provide residents with sticky bands if you don't have access to them. If you have any other questions, I'm here until the end. We have Jeff for mosquito and lanternfly as well as tick questions. Do you have any questions? Good. Well, I thank you all for coming out tonight. It's a pretty miserable night as the rest of the week has been, but we all braved through it. So we'll keep you up to date on spotted lanternflies. If you haven't signed in, we have a sign-in sheet going around. You can add you to our mailing list. And we do have information up here on the spotted lanternfly. There's a list of the active ingredients and all the pesticides, tree of heaven identification,